Hello everyone, and a really warm welcome to another courageous conversation where we are celebrating the voices, courage and wisdom of women. My name's Pollyanna Darling and I look after community engagement at Tree Sisters, and I'm really thrilled today to be speaking with Kerryn Coombs-Valeontis. I hope I've said that right. So Kerryn is an eco-art therapist and poet, and she has her first collection due out this year. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce it. And she's just co-authored a book called Nature Heals, which is an introduction to nature-based therapy in Australia and New Zealand, which is launching this month. She has also founded and facilitates a Diploma in Ecotherapy, which has students completing. And she's also hosting a Sing for the Trees event this Friday in her wombat earth labyrinth that she made in a grove of she oaks. I'm really happy to be talking to you today, Kerryn. I've got so many questions and a really warm welcome to Courageous Conversations.
Thank you.
So I'd love to start by asking you why it is that you're a tree sister.
I'm absolutely ecstatic to be a tree sister because it's very, very deeply aligned with a very deep, should I say, hunger, perhaps starving for somewhere that where you care. And I was going to say give a shit, if that's all right, but really care about what's going on in the planet, and it actually affects me deeply. There's a thing called eco-anxiety. It's a thing. Psychologists are acknowledging it. Psychiatrists are acknowledging it. There's lots about it around on the net. And I have it. I suffer deeply from eco-anxiety. So not that we needed another type of anxiety to suffer from. There's enough already. But it's the eco-anxiety that fuels and is at the root of all my other anxieties, if you like, worries. And this is a salve, a balm. It's about one of the only things that does help is to be able to share at that deep level what is concerning me, what keeps me up at night, what makes me so crazy angry sometimes when the news is on. I actually don't watch it anymore, but when I hear the news that's going on. So Tree Sisters is a place to bring all of that and with also, and it's very important that with alongside eco-anxiety, we also talk about sort of joy, the jubilation, the absolute ecstasy of also this beautiful, beautiful planet covered in trees, or once was, and is being recovered in trees with Tree Sisters. And that just aligns deeply with a wound that kind of like the Fisher King wound. And I know that's a masculine mythology, but women have a masculine, and my wound is the wound that will never get better, is what we're doing to the earth. So Tree Sisters is a place I can bring that wound, I can wash that wound, I can salve that wound can be tended to, and perhaps begin to start to heal the wound.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's actually making me cry. Yeah, and I know so many women experience eco-anxiety. I met a lot of women this weekend who, because I've just been at the Seven Sisters Festival down in Victoria, and I met lots of women who are experiencing that very same anxiety, and it's not very much talked about, is it? Like, it's not, I mean, there's not a lot of talk about eco-anxiety, even though so many people are feeling the stress of it.
No, I don't really find many places to talk about. I mean, in mental health, I've been working in sort of mainstream clinical mental health for a while. They talk about anxiety for sure. GAD is a diagnosis whacked on lots of files, generalized anxiety disorder. So it's labeled as a disorder, but that makes me want to jump up and scream and say it's not a disorder. We're all suffering from a level of wounding and trauma. It's actually kind of ambient trauma. And really there's research about this. Ambient trauma is trauma that is felt around you, but it's not necessarily seen. So, think of a child in a domestic violence situation. The door is shut, but he or she can hear the noises and knows that it's going on, even though they're not seeing it. So eco-anxiety is kind of like a pre-traumatic disorder where you know, or you feel, and you know in your intuition that something is wrong, something is not right. And yeah, there's not a lot of places to talk about that. You get labelled crazy. I think they used to lock us up for this sort of hysteria once. It's definitely sidelined, and it's not a place to, if you start talking about it, you're aggressive or you're confronting or you're too loud or too, I don't know, too affected by it. Don't be so affected by it,
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing.
Yeah, and there's a part of me that wonders whether that's actually, as women, that this anxiety that we're feeling is actually, an expression of Earth's of the trauma that's on the Earth, and that it's calling us into doing something different, into rising together. It's like that's what's calling us all together in a way, is that feeling of there's something isn't right, and actually we are the ones who can change that. Yeah. So,
or go down
tell me
trying,
about,
or go down
yes.
trying. Even if it's all going down, and yes, that might be my eco-anxiety speaking. And it may be irrational. God, I hope it is. Maybe that's not the truth, but even if that is the thing, to have a go, to have a crack, we say in Australia, to have a crack, rather than do nothing, because that will send me insane. That will put me in some sort of facility. I don't know. to not be able to do anything is really crazy making for me. Yeah.
And to be able to do something, just in building this movement and bringing women together, it's such a relief for so many people to go, I'm not on my own, and actually there's thousands of women doing something, and we're never going to stop, we're never going to give up. So tell me, I'd love to know about what it was that brought you to ecotherapy, and if you can just explain a little for people who might not know what ecotherapy is, and what was your journey to coming to that?
Yeah, so you've already heard a little bit about my eco-anxiety, and that is my journey, really, because I have felt that in one level or another. I felt that when it didn't have a name, when there was no name and no place to put that fear, it was a nameless fear, if you like, for many, many years, but I certainly felt it. It doesn't need a name to or a diagnosis or be in the DSM, to actually feel it. So ecotherapy, and I say that word, I notice myself saying it with real fondness, real love is how I say that. Essentially, in a nutshell, it's applied eco-psychology, which I met eco-psychology as a name, as a label, as a thing, about 20 years ago in my Masters of Social Ecology. So they talked about eco-psychology. I was like, oh my goodness, yes. Wow, this is the thing. Let's go there. Let's see what's. And essentially, eco-psychology, and my knowledge is a growing knowledge. It's not exhaustive by any means, and it's a growing definition, a working definition. But it's bringing the environment back into psychology. So Bill Plotkin is a guy who inspires me. He wrote a book about rewilding psychology. He also writes about soul a lot, soulcraft, and he does beautiful vision quests, I think, in the US, and is with the Animus Institute, something. He talks about psychology having forgotten its wilding roots that came from the poets and the philosophers first. Freud said, everywhere I go, the poets have been there before me. And poetry and philosophy, with the storytellers and the story holders and story keepers, they were the first psychologists, and the myths and the stories, and they came from a wild place. They there were trees and rivers and mountains, and they were wilded. They didn't know that there was any other way to be. So I suppose it's reclaiming. So ecotherapy is not new. It's not a fad. It's not a thing that's just a bit trendy or whatever. It's actually reclaiming what is very, very ancient and what is very, very old. And Indigenous, First Nations people, they haven't forgotten. It seems like we in the West have forgotten our Western civilization has forgotten its roots, and I think we're going back for them. And I guess the way I do ecotherapy, well, we're going back for what we forgot. You know, we need to. And I guess the way I do ecotherapy is going back for what we've forgotten, going back. I suppose an image comes to mind, you know, picking over the bones from Women Who Run with the Wolves. That's Clarissa. I can't say her surname, sorry. But people will know it, I'm so sure. But
Pinkola Estes.
That's it. Thank you.
Estes.
Thank you. Thank you. Going back to what we've forgotten, and you know, First Nations and Indigenous cultures can lead the way here. They are leading the way. Their stories, their myths, their dreaming, their incredible connection to country, which has been so diabolically severed and yet still remains as a testament to survival. That inspires me. That utterly inspires me deeply, and so much wisdom in the stories and in the ways of being with country and songlines and singing up country from the Indigenous Australians. That so the way I've been doing ecotherapy is sort of forging my own way in a way, but I'm very inspired by the books. There's a couple of books out there. One is called Radical Eco-Psychology by Andy Fisher. There's another one, Ecotherapy, and I've just forgotten its editors. Sorry, but they talk about the way people something about healing and psychology that's healing and restoring to the earth. I think Theodore Rosenjack is in there somewhere with another editor. Mary Gnomes is coming to mind, Gnomes. Anyway, they have, I've read those books. I contacted those books through my social ecology studies and started to just kind of know that there was a theoretical and research-based, evidence-based, if you like, platform of this work. And I stood myself up on that, firstly in a kind of a community way. So I did some projects for my social ecology where I worked at preschools, making, you know, sensory gardens and that sort of thing with the very multicultural preschool community in the middle of Western Sydney, where I live.
What's a sensory garden? What is a sensory garden?
Oh, so it's a garden that invites all of the senses to be activated. So it's a hear, smell, touch, feel, taste garden. You know, there's no signs of keep off the grass or keep out of the, you know, it's very much a come into the garden. Please touch, please smell, taste, you know, see, hear, listen to what's around you. The senses are kind of doors and windows into the soul, if you like, and really the first port of call when nature comes calling to connect with you or to connect with your deep eco-self that is always there. Eco-self is a term from deep ecology. Arne Næss, who's a Norwegian philosopher and professor, I think coined the term, but Joanna Macy's written beautifully about the eco-self. I believe it's always there. We just forget about it or ignore it or go rushing by it, really. So it's just a stopping and a listening. And the gateways are the senses through that. So I really did start working with children, but that meant working with families. The mums and the dads would come down to the working bees and be a part of it. That was gorgeous. I was also at that time a community development worker. So I was working with a very large community garden called the Gardens for Celebration, which was in Mount Druitt, which is a very low socio-economic area, very high social housing area of Sydney, with a lot of alienation and a lot of poverty, which has a lot of associated issues, I suppose. But what we wanted to do is look at the community from a positive point of view, and the garden really did help. And one of my favourite things was working with the elders, the Indigenous elders there, making a bush tucker garden and working with the kids in the holiday program. Alawa Murray Tula, which is Darug for Together We Share and Enjoy. It's a beautiful youth program of sort of Indigenous kids and lots of other kids. And we did lots of fun things, but there was lots of wheelbarrows roaring around the garden. There was lots of plants, seeds thrown. There was lots of things planted. There was occasionally watered things. There was reaping harvests. It was a bit chaotic, but it was gorgeous in its ownership of the kids in the community. Yeah. So I kind of realised that I was doing what is sort of a mainstream term, therapeutic and social horticulture. There is also a term, horticulture therapy, that the horticulturists like to claim, but it was really therapeutic horticulture. But then I realised that wasn't enough for me, though. I needed to go deeper, and did go deeper. And it was not just the garden, but it was the whole of nature that was part of this process, and this amazing healing that I would see spontaneously, watch, witness, hear. You know, behavioural problems became so minimised in nature. You know, aggression was brought right down, competition was brought right down, fun was ramped right up, joy, laughter, you know, jokes, you know, people, water fights, you know, these ramped up in the garden, in nature, in around trees. And I just, you know, that's not new to all of you who've watched children in nature. You know why Grandma locked you out of the house and said, go out and get dirty for a few hours, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, she knew. She knew. It was good for you. It actually turns out that it's incredibly good for you. Science has caught up with Grandma, and they now can prove that, you know, it's unbelievably conclusive that actually getting in the dirt produces serotonin in your body. Now, for someone with mental health and very low serotonin, that's radical. That is radical for them to hear that, because they're on medication, they're on all sorts of neurotransmitters to try and up their serotonin, you know. Serotonin is a byproduct caused when the body comes in contact with dirt, particularly compost. So if compost had any poo in it, that's the better. That produces the stronger reaction. Any live microbes, you know, and composting, of course, takes out any of the nasties of that heats up and kills that. It turns out we make serotonin. So you know, it's radical.
That's so
it's
cool.
Just radical.
That's so cool. I know for me, you know, if I feel desperately miserable or extremely premenstrual, if I go out into my garden and I do weeding and, you know, get my hands in the dirt, and just often I'll sit on the ground and do it without noticing, in maybe half an hour, 40 minutes, I feel better. I just feel better and more grounded. And, you know, I often will leave the garden thinking, I don't know what was wrong with me beforehand, you know. Perfectly fine.
Yes.
Yeah.
That reminds me of a line of poetry from Wallace Stevens. Sometimes the truth depends upon a walk around the lake. Sometimes the truth depends on a session of gardening, I tell you, for me too.
Yeah.
It's a sanity thing. It's a grounding thing. Absolutely. It turns out that grounding is a thing, literally, contact with the earth without shoes. So, you know, think Pretty Woman, Richard Gere in the park with his shoes off. But turns out earthing does a lot of good things, like lower your blood pressure, like bring heart rate down, like lower stress response, cortisol and adrenaline, but also reducing inflammation in the body, would you believe?
Wow.
There's something about aligning with the polar kind of magnetic field of the earth, reducing inflammation. So all the science is, actually, I can't move without the science being there, of some research study that shows about nature and beneficial. The latest one I read is that children in nature are kinder, more compassionate. Well, that's probably why Grandma also kicked us out back in the day and said, go and get dirty for a while and don't come inside the house. Children are kinder when they are in touch with nature, and adults' inner child is kinder when it's in nature. So nature helps us be compassionate, and I think the world is starving for compassion as well.
Yeah. So this is all amazing and kind of blowing my mind and making me feel really happy. So I'm curious, because one of the things I noticed was that your ecotherapy is, and is it the book that you've written is nature-based therapy in Australia and New Zealand? And I wondered whether there's something different. I mean, obviously there's something different about the nature, but whether nature therapy in Australia and New Zealand is different. Because I know for myself that, I grew up in England. You could lie down in the fields and, roll about in the grass and everything was completely fine. But here, you lie down in the fields and roll about and you're covered in ticks and bitten by ants. And, it's a different, the nature here is different. It's sometimes to me it feels less benevolent and much more raw and powerful in a way. And I wondered, whether you think there's a difference between the nature-based therapy in Australia and New Zealand and in other parts of the world.
Essentially, I think when we began the journey of writing a book, and it is a journey, it's been at least 5 years, we realised that there were books up in the Northern Hemisphere, kind of based around the Northern Hemisphere seasons and trees and plants and kind of mythology and stories. And we wanted to base it down here in the southerly kind of, down under, they say. But as we came along, and what we did do is collect stories from people who are doing this, forging this, doing it in their own way. And when we were collecting these stories, about 20 of them that we collected from Australia and New Zealand, we realised people are doing it sort of distinctly their own way down here. Growing up in New Zealand, I know that New Zealand prides itself in its innovation and creativity, and Kiwis are very innovative people, if you ask me, in my take on it. And they just get on with it, do their thing. Australians do too. We're quite belligerent about authority and about being told, from the top down how to do it or the right way. Or we kicked all that off a few hundred years ago, and we kind of like our heads in this. We like to do our thing in distinctly our way. And yes, relationship to country in both countries, Australia and New Zealand, is different. Is different, as in, and I guess I'm aware of saying this, that there's a thing there going, well, as to what? And I think we're probably still throwing off the vestiges of the colonized histories that we both share, and the kind of the parent UK thing. We're still, I think, in saying we're doing things differently as to compared to what. There is still that whisper of colonial stuff, which I think we're still probably shaking off the last vestiges of that. So I suppose there is a little bit of rebellion in it, doing it in our way, certainly resistance, and just a good old shot of, well, we'll just very practical. So we'll just get on with it. We won't sit around and have a meeting and discuss it for a couple of hundred years and wait for ecotherapy to be recognised as officially a thing. We'll just get on with it because we know it works. So I guess there's a good amount of kind of practicality in that coming, which comes from the land. And I suppose the harshness that you were talking about of our grass, it's also got bendies, Pollyanna. It's also got bendies, yeah. And big burrs at times. So I still find soft grass to roll in though. Try wetlands grass. Grass in wetlands is so spongy it's like a mattress. And yeah, so that's what I'd say to you there.
So I also wonder, the relationship to country in Australia feels very unique because we do have an Indigenous population who, have this unbroken connection with country that goes for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years, which, is quite extraordinary. And as white Australians, we don't really have any concept of the depth and breadth of that deep relationship to country. How have you found that in your work and in the ecotherapy? Like, how much does Indigenous wisdom come into that? And do you include that in your work?
Oh, absolutely. It is a foundation. It is foundational to the work, particularly in this context. So as a white Australian, goodness, I don't like using that word, but there it is. It's a division, isn't it? I don't know. I'm uncomfortable with the term, but I do feel a deep connection with nature, and I guess through my inherited culture, which is the Celtic culture, Cornish from my mother, bits of Scottish and a few other mongrel things from my father. There is a deep legacy of connection to country through stories and mythology, albeit the Northern Hemisphere, and, oak trees and such. There's such deep mythology around the oak tree, the oak man, the green man, that I'm so utterly fascinated with. But I give great respect to the First Nations of this country who know this land and who have evolved here for 60,000 years or so, and also the Maori people in New Zealand. Long time they've been knowing the land, lots of wisdom. So I absolutely give great respect, deep respect to that, the stories, and they know country. They know country, and to be on country with an Indigenous person is such a privilege, and such a learning, and such a just the smoking ceremony. I just love it. I just love it. It's so very spiritual. It's so very cleansing. It's just such a thing for Australia, smoked gum leaves. It's just beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the sense of smell, and yeah.
So I know we're getting close to time. I'd love to talk to you for hours. It's totally fascinating. But I would, one of the things that we've been exploring and are starting to explore in these courageous conversations is feminine nature-based leadership and what that looks like to different women, because it's going to be different for many of us, but we're exploring what the core themes of that might be. And so I'd love to know what feminine nature-based leadership feels like to you. Like,
And that also is such a working definition. Do you know, I've only really come into the term in the last couple of months, Pollyanna, as I've had something to do with Tree Sisters. And I've heard Claire Dubois talk about feminine nature-based leadership for the moon circles, the new moon and the full moon circles. And I've just gone, oh God, that's a thing? Oh, bring it on. Just bring it on. just slather us to that. Because again, I feel starved for it in myself and in my community and in my culture. I feel so ravenously hungry for it. But in a way, I've kind of been doing it too. And there's a gorgeous outrageousness about feminine-based leadership because we just do it. We just get in there, we don't hold committees and wait for approvals. And don't misunderstand that, but, we don't, well, sometimes we do illegal things well, I'm talking about civil disobedience and things like that, chaining. I've got friends who black wallabied in forests to stop them being deforestation, and that was illegal. And yet they're heroes to me, unbelievable heroes. So feminine nature-based leadership just gets into it, rolls up its sleeves and sees the need and just gets into it where it is. It starts right from where it is. It doesn't need to go way over here and do it or way over there. It just says, right around me is a desperate crying need. Let's just sort that out first. So, I'm speaking very rawly here because it's not something I've studied. It's not something I have even thought a lot about. Deep in my gut, it's just gone, yes, just get on with it. Just do it, and we're hungry for it. I guess I've heard a thing that says that mainstream thought is 100 years behind, where the innovators and the movers and the shakers are. And so I don't think feminine nature-based leadership waits for the evidence base to catch up with it, or the committees to approve it, or put categorize it officially. It just gets on with it, and when they see a need, responding to need. It's very compassionate, deeply compassionate. It comes from an absolute love of the world and the world's children.
Yeah, that's so true. While you're talking about feminine nature-based leadership starting right where you are, it makes me think about my children. And, if someone falls over or there's some biffo going on between two of my kids, the thing that happens is that you respond in the moment. You just attend to what needs to be attended to.
Yes.
And
yes.
I really feel like the women that are coming into Tree Sisters, the network that we have, is rising to that need to attend to the earth. That, you know, there is this thing right in front of us that's happening, and here we are going, okay, I'm coming to love that back into wholeness, I guess. Yeah. So it's been wonderful speaking to you. Really fascinating and beautiful, and yeah, really great. Thank you so much for being with us. And if you have any, I'd love to finish, if you've got any message to anyone out there that you would like to say to anybody about participating in the movement that's Tree Sisters, I would really love to finish on that if you would like to offer something.
Well, yeah, we just need to find our tribe, I suppose. And the Tree Sisters is a tribe. It's virtual and viral and, you know, all over the world. And I feel global is the word I meant to say, not viral. Don't know where that came from, don't worry. Global. And I feel it's a time for global. So while we're getting on with what we're doing right here in our own backyard, the globe, women around the globe are also doing it. That feels fantastic. That feels like they've got my back somewhere. Or my shoulders, when you put your shoulder into it. They've got my back, they've got my shoulders, they've got... It just feels like I'm not alone so much. And that is brilliant. We'll all go way further like that.
Yeah.
And deeper.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And if anyone out there would like to go further and deeper with Tree Sisters, do come and join our nest. So if you Google Tree Sisters Nest, you can come in. We have a Tree Sisters community that's comprised of women from all over the world. We're redreaming our future in that community. We've got science in there. We've got research and arts and Sing for the Trees and so many other things. And I wish you very well with your Sing for the Trees event, Kerryn. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Lovely, really lovely to have a say.
All right, see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.